Campside Media.
Hey Campside listeners, welcome back to Inside the Tent, our show where we go behind the mic of our favorite podcasts and talk to the people who brought them to life. My name is Abukar Adan and I'm a senior producer at Campside Media. Today, I'm talking to Natalie the host, writer, and executive producer of our new show, Catch Me If You Can. The series dives into a never-before-told scam that stretches across continents, unraveling a web of digital vanishing acts, fake identities, and heartbreaking tales. I had a chance to work with Natalie on Catch Me If You Can, and I'm excited for you to hear more about what it was like chasing one of the most elusive con artists. If you want more exclusive content or behind-the-scenes anecdotes from our shows, make sure to go to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com. Now here's my conversation with Natalie. Hey, Natalie. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Abukar. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, the show's out in the world. How are you feeling?
I feel great. I mean, I'm very glad that the show is out and already been getting some good feedback. So glad to hear that. Of course, I'm still kind of holding a candle for some of the things we weren't able to do. Not that I'm going to give any spoilers, but yeah, very happy that it's out in the world.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But compared to most of the other scam stories that I've worked on, there's remarkably very little on the public record. And so what did you know about Ken and the show going in, and what drew you to it? Because there are just so many scams out there these days.
You know, I really didn't know that much about him other than the fact that he, I'd heard a couple stories about him working in different cities and allegations from different girlfriends and family members of those girlfriends. So I had initially thought that this was honestly much smaller in scope. I had thought that this was a guy who was creating companies and getting people to invest in them and then, perhaps not really returning on that investment. I did not realize that there was a whole crypto part of this alleged scam. So discovering that and learning about all of that was fascinating. I mean, I think the thing that drew me to it is, like Ken, I grew up not in America. I grew up in Dubai, in the UAE. Ken grew up in Singapore. And I think one of the things that I was very intrigued by with the story was the fact that Ken had this allure and projection of wealth from his appearance and his accent. And that is something that I've also felt people project onto me. I have this sort of hard to place accent. And as I say in the show, I think it's made people sometimes think that I'm richer than I am or smarter than I am. And I was just very interested in the way that a kind of accent and the appearance of wealth can create an illusion that can kind of draw people in. So that's what drew me to the story.
In addition to the accent thing that resonated with you, I think coming from where you come from, and I think you had said you went to a similar high school, or the country that you grew up in is in a lot of ways similar to Singapore, right?
Yeah. So I've actually been to Singapore, and, I grew up in the UAE, which is like very heavily, lots and lots of expats. At least when I was growing up there, it was almost, something like 90% expat community. And I went to a British system school that was mostly British kids or international kids from all around the world or a mix of places. And especially in the earlier years of my childhood, a lot of the people that we were friends with were these other families who'd moved from Hong Kong to the UAE or moved from Australia to there or South Africa or Singapore, for example. I had some family friends from Singapore back in the day. So I was kind of familiar with this world of sort of like a upper middle class. And of course, it's like always interesting to me when somebody can leave where they're from and create a whole new life somewhere else, partially because that's what I've done. Like I left where I'm from and made a whole new life here in the US. So to see how somebody's done that, arguably for the worse, is just kind of fascinating to me.
Do you remember the moment where you're like, oh my God, this is so much bigger than I thought?
When I started talking to the victims, that's when I realized that it was much bigger, because it wasn't just one or two victims. It was many, many, many victims. And like I ended up talking to a lot more victims than we even introduced on the podcast, because there were simply too many people in a way. Also, you, Abukar, did like a ton of reporting on this show. And I think working with you on this show really helped me see how much bigger it was, because you were able to find records of Ken being in the US as far back as 2010. And so seeing the length of time that this was going on for was really shocking to me.
Yeah, one thing that surprised me was even before then, when we were talking to a lot of the victims, how some of the things that we see in him, the fact that he hides so many parts of himself, it's like the lengths that he would go to not tell his partners and his friends who his parents are, allegedly, go way back to like his high school days and even before then. And he was just as charismatic. He was just as cunning when he was young. What was like most surprising to you about Ken?
Honestly, the fact that he was really into bowling. I don't know why that stuck with me so much, but firstly, it's just, to me, a kind of unusual sport for somebody to be playing as a teenager. But I also just found something very cinematic about that. Like, it's a sport that you play alone. It's you against the pins trying to knock them all down, and you have to have laser sharp focus and really good aim, and you have to spin the ball just right. You know, there was something about that that really lodged in my brain. I mean, it's so rare in these instances that we can find hobbies for alleged scammers.
Yeah, we were able to piece together a lot of his early childhood and his teenage years, even though a lot of the people did not want to talk to us. And I know that that was frustrating for both of us in many ways, but I'm surprised by how much we were able to learn from him, even though the people who knew him pre-US did not want to talk to us.
Totally. You did a really good job of explaining this and diving into it in the latter third of the series, where we ended up working with an on-the-ground stringer to kind of help us put this story together. And according to him, some of the reason why Ken's early life friends maybe didn't want to talk to us was a cultural one. Our stringer suggested that perhaps upper crust Singaporeans might just want to stick to themselves, and you keep private things within the family. You keep any kind of misdeeds or potential wrongdoing quiet, and you keep it internal. And so nobody wants to pile on or like have any kind of bad thing reflected back onto themselves. This was a long slog where it felt like for a very, very long time, we did not find anything. And then with the help of a couple sources and a couple lawsuits, and with your fantastic digging into his early life in Singapore, we were able to actually find quite a lot.
Yeah, and I know we talk a lot about the US and Singapore, but he's bounced around quite a bit. The show takes us to Spain and Germany and a number of other places as well. And so with the show that spans so many different continents, what were some of the other reporting challenges?
Language. Trying to talk to people for whom English isn't their first language, whether that's sources or police departments, was pretty difficult, honestly. And obviously there's time zones, and thank God we can use Google Translate, and a lot of people's English is much better than my German or Italian is. But the difficulty we had reporting across these different jurisdictions really replicated the difficulty that law enforcement had, I think, to pin Ken down.
Yeah, the different municipalities not communicating. Do you have any sense of where he might be now, or?
Well, the last place we were able to track him down was a seaside city called Alicante in Spain. And the way we were able to do that was fascinating. We had a researcher dissect this picture of him, and the researcher was able to match the lamppost in the picture to this one specific seaside town in Spain. Like truly wild minutia that was required to figure out where he was. That's his last known location. But me personally, I do still think that he is out there. It's very X-Files.
I mean, if he was listening to the show, it's out in the world right now. What do you hope he takes away from it, if anything?
I would just really want him to hear how his actions have hurt people. I think that was, for me, the biggest takeaway for the shows, talking to these victims who've lost so much money. But it's not just money. It's their relationships with family, with their dreams and aspirations, with their ability to trust people coming into their lives. And I'm trying not to be too moralistic, but I would just really want him to be able to hear the pain he's caused other people and take that in and kind of really sit with that. Because I think when dealing with money, sometimes it can just look like digits in your bank account or in your crypto wallet, in his case. And it might be easy to divorce that from the kind of blood, sweat, and tears that went into earning that money or working so hard for it. I would just like him to think about that these aren't just digits without any consequences, that there are consequences to this.
Yeah, his actions have torn apart families.
Yeah.
Like families aren't talking to each other because of what he's done. I still am holding out hope that maybe he'll reach out to us and be like, let me tell you my side of the story.
Stranger things have happened. My inbox is open. You can find me on Instagram. Hit me up. I'm there, Ken, if you're listening.
I think what's really fascinating about him is like just how he was able to vanish, right? It's not like he was a regular person and he vanished. He was living this lavish Instagram lifestyle. He was putting his business out there. And then all of a sudden, he managed to scrape everything, at least compared to the other stories that I've worked on. Like, I have never seen anyone disappear like that and do it so effectively.
Well, and I think that's one of the benefits of operating under different names. The name he's introduced as is not the name that he continues to use. And in fact, he uses several different monikers throughout the series. And so I think that has a lot to do with why he's able to flit away, is when you go somewhere and change your name, it's pretty hard to find you.
I think when working on these stories, like you're trying to tell a story, but also you're trying to be as fair and as accurate to all of the people involved. And I wonder how you deal with that when the person at the center of it all is nowhere to be found.
I think the way that at least I tried to deal with this in this story is really rely wherever possible on documents. I have a background as a financial journalist. I worked at Forbes for many years. So I've spent like way too many months of my life pouring through people's various contracts and financial documents and all that kind of stuff. And so that's sort of like what we ended up doing with this. And wherever possible, just going through the paper trail and having a really, really thorough examination of every bit of documentation that we could find related to any of his activity. And then I think the other thing that we tried to do in telling this story, where one of the main characters isn't speaking to us, was to try and put ourselves in his head a little bit and imagine wherever possible what he might have been thinking. Because there actually are some very interesting things about his activities. Like for somebody for whom a lot of his alleged scams happened online, he ended up meeting all of his victims in real life that we know of. And he actually ended up staying in touch with them even after he had disappeared a couple times, and just continuing the communication in a really strange way. Sometimes, in some cases, with a couple people, even paying them back partially. And that was very interesting to me, because most alleged scammers, you would think when they leave, they would just disappear. But no, he would keep sending emails and keep staying in touch and keep apologizing or promising that he would send money back. And then in some cases actually would. That is so interesting to me. Like, what drives you to do that? Is it guilt? Is it trying to get these people off your back? That was just the thing that stuck in my head, because it made me wonder, does he have a conscience? You know, like, is this weighing on him?
Or is this the reason why he's able to get away with it for so long? I mean, he really knows how to play people. And I think that to me is the through line of his life. I remember when we first stumbled on those photos of him as a teen and just the way he was interacting with his friends and just how cunning and how charming he was. And I'm like, wow, 20 years, 30 years later, that hasn't changed. And so my hunch is that's probably part of the reason why he's able to get by.
I think that's something a lot of what the people that we spoke to said, that he has this kind of baby face and this sort of non-threatening demeanor. And that may have helped him a lot of times.
Yeah, there were a lot of hands on this project. There was a lot of material that we had on hand or we found. What was left on the cutting room floor where you were like, oh, I wish we could have added this bit?
Well, two things. One of them, I spoke to one of his landlords who I found fascinating, and I wish I'd had space to include that interview. That was a great little story. But my favorite nugget that got left on the cutting room floor was to do with one of Ken's dogs. So this was back when he was living in LA in the Hollywood Hills house. And there was a lawsuit basically where he had this pit bull. I have a pit bull, so this is like a very close to home story. But they're these kind of muscular, threatening looking dogs that have a reputation for being used in dogfighting, even though they're the sweetest dogs, I will say. One of his dogs allegedly got loose and attacked a gardener. I spoke to the lawyer that represented this gardener. And this was the time when Ken was living in this gorgeous house with so many bedrooms and a saltwater pool and 6 luxury cars out front. The gardener ended up suing Ken for $100,000. I don't remember exactly what the charges were, but it was basically medical costs and then personal injury. And the lawyer that I spoke to was a really incredibly colorful character. He had this very fascinating anecdote where he claimed that one of his processors went and tried to serve Becca, Ken's then wife, papers, and that somebody answered the door who matched her description and said, oh, there's no Becca Sable here. But the reason I found this story so interesting was that it really hit home the illusion of wealth that Ken was projecting, that his gardener would essentially try and sue him for $100,000. Like, clearly that gardener thought he had that money. And yet, at right around the same time, like, Ken's taking $60,000 from his house cleaner. But yeah, for me, one of the like more fun and lighthearted threads through this are these dogs. Not just because I'm a dog person, but because, and several people told me this, I wasn't really able to fit it in, but Ken kept having these designer French bulldogs, which are very expensive. Like, they cost thousands of dollars for a puppy. And this dog would be super friendly. He had like at least 2 different French bulldogs that I've seen pictures of. And he would kind of use these dogs as not a lure, but a kind of like opening line. People would come and pet the dog and be like, oh my God, your dog's so cute. And from there, you know, he has an entree.
Yeah. There were also like so many people that we had on background that I just wish would have given us permission to use some of the things that they were saying because they were very insightful. And I think it speaks to the hold that Ken has on so many people. But the thing that I wanted to close this conversation with is like how this podcast is being received. And I know, you know, we both got a text from one of the people it featured. And when she started talking about how she found closure in this. And we spend so much time and energy on a show like this. And so getting a message like that, I think is very rewarding. But I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's still really early days. So I have yet to hear from a lot of the people involved. And it's always honestly, such a joy to like hear from listeners and hear that they enjoy it. And I really hope that people take away a little more than just that it's a tantalizing true crime tale, because it's not just that to me. Like, of course, it has all these great twists and turns, and it does keep you on, if I say so myself, on the edge of your seat and wanting to keep listening. But I do think it's also about something much deeper and about our relationships to money and to each other. And so, as I kind of already alluded to, and as you referenced, like, we did receive a very nice message from somebody involved that it brought her closure in some way. And that means so much to me. As a reporter, when you're working on a story where there has been so much alleged wrongdoing and so many hurt feelings and so many people who've had their trust broken, it's really hard to gain their trust, and you feel very protective. Like you don't want to screw them over, to put it bluntly. You want to be fair to them. And so, especially people who have allegedly lost money to this guy or have had their relationships damaged, they're probably not really likely to get closure from him. You know, like he's disappeared and out their life. But knowing that they're not alone and hearing how other people have navigated this and also hearing what all of this might mean, if that can help them, then that's a job well done. That would make me very happy.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I really
thank you so
enjoyed
much.
talking to you.
And thank you. Like, we literally could not have done this without your reporting. And I think that you're too modest to say that. But you were an absolutely crucial part of this team, and we would not have been able to make the show without you. So thank you.
It was really fun. I hope we get to work together again.
Same.
Someday.
Next scammer, watch out.
Thanks so much to Natalie and the rest of the Catch Me If You Can team. And thank you for listening to Inside the Tent. If you haven't already, don't forget to go to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com.